Healers and tanks getting bags with mounts in. I mean, in Classic, unheard of. Well, it was unheard of until the Blizzard interview with Chris. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I'll put a link in the description below. But it was announced during the developer interview by myself and Mr. GM when we interviewed Chris from Blizzard. It was a fantastic interview, but we got some bombshells absolutely just dropped all over the interview. So they announced the fact that, yeah, if you're a tank or a healer and you're in demand, you'll get a bag with consumables and potential mounts from dungeons. I was fortunate enough to get invited onto Warcraft Reloaded, which is a fantastic podcast. I'll put a link to all of their socials in the description below, so check them out on YouTube, check them out on Spotify, iTunes, like anywhere you can get a podcast, you can pretty much find these guys, and they are absolutely fantastic. So myself, Bob, Mel, and Duranosaur, we had a good chat about these bags and how we think they should work, what their intended purpose is. And the following video is basically a bit of a condensed down version of our discussion, so you can take away the main points from it. Enjoy.
There's a new bonus bag. Anybody who plays or who played like late Kata, early Mop, maybe it was, but basically they used to give incentives in random dungeon finder, like they didn't have enough tanks queuing or they didn't have enough healers queuing. And they would give a bonus bag incentive to the class that needed to queue more. Well, in this, they've created an algorithm. So this has nothing to do with the new looking for group, like UI or whatever. But if the algorithm sees that you tanked or healed through a dungeon. Now, is this only heroic dungeons? Do we know? Or is this any dungeon?
It wasn't specific. I would assume heroics.
Yeah, okay. So if you tank or heal, you get a bonus bag at the end that gives you consumes and has a small chance to give you rare mounts. They've specifically said like Ashes of Alar would not be a mount in there, but they did say the Baron mount would be a possibility. I think mount for Magistr's Terrace
drop in dungeons in the previous expansions.
Yeah. So you're not going to get the Tiger.
Anzu's a bit of a weird one because Anzu, even in Wrath, still needs the for you to be able to summon it. So I thought that was a bit strange. You still need. It's not until Kata pre-patch where you don't. It's just a boss in Kata pre-patch. So I thought that was a bit of a weird one because that sucks for druids that during Wrath actually go and do the quest. To be able to still summon it, to sell it, or whatever they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only one I don't agree with. When they said, "Oh, Calfas," everyone automatically was like, "Oh, it's going to drop Ashes of Alar." I knew straight away it was a White Hawk Strider. Obviously, it made sense, and that's fine because it doesn't require anything, does it? You can just go in there and farm it solo. But the Anzu one, I can't really get on board with that being in the bag.
Well, and supposedly they say it's a really rare chance, but their main focus on this was to basically give incentive for healers and tanks to be in dungeons, constantly. Like it makes it so they don't have their reasoning makes it so they don't have to farm consumes and stuff like that of that nature. I don't even know where to start with all this.
Not farming consumes. I agree with this. I think this sounds great.
I don't agree with it. I'll just put that out there straight away. Yeah, I don't agree with that was why in the interview specifically I even said, sorry, can we just clarify something? So you don't need to use the LFG tool. I can't remember how I worded it in the interview. It was along those lines. I was like, so
that was interesting.
What did he specify? He specified that you couldn't do it as a a solo tank. Which made me think,
you can't.
Do you have to be a 5-man dungeon? Does it have to be 5 people, or can you do it with 4 or 3?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, didn't specify the amount of people there needs to be. He just said, you couldn't do it solo. But
it's a really interesting thing because they implemented this in later expansions through the looking for dungeon tool, and the way that it worked was who got that bonus loot depended on which role was not queuing enough to fill the dungeons.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there were times where DPS would get the loot because there were more tanks and healers queuing than DPS.
No way.
Yeah.
There was probably times,
because
you need 3 DPS for every 1 healer and tank, too.
with the way this is implemented, because it's not tied to anything that tracks the pool of players available, and it's always tanks and healers, like DPS are never going to get this, which means that as things go on, it's going to be funny. I don't know if this is actually going to happen, but what you could see is like trade chat, or sorry, looking for group chat, the looking for group finder, bulletin board, whatever it may be, just full of tanks and healers. They're like, we just want DPS. Come DPS. We need DPS. We need DPS. Because for them, if they can spam run dungeons all day, yeah, they get consumables. They get like a chance at amount. And for them, it like potentially becomes like this amazing gold farm. And for DPS, it's like, why would I go run that dungeon again? Like I don't get anything for going and doing that.
What if they made the consumables and everything soulbound so that it wasn't like you could use these and sell them on the auction house and make money?
That's actually a really good call, Mel. That's something they definitely should do. So it doesn't screw the market.
There was an algorithm.
I think the algorithm is how much did you heal in that dungeon? How many people were in that dungeon?
And how much damage did you take?
How much damage did you take? I don't think the algorithm has anything to do with forming the group.
Right.
Well, I assumed the algorithm was to do with the amount of people.
Well, that's the thing.
I think that's probably in there too. Yeah. Well, they just see who all has done any moves in the dungeons. You know what I mean? You could probably cheese that though.
Without them having like an LFD tool implemented in the game that is like tracking who all is like in queue for these things, like yeah, there is that like group finder thing, but I feel like people form more groups outside of group finder than in group finder these days still. I don't know.
And how does it specify who the tank is? So if we were to think about with how easy Wrath dungeons are, I could tank with Righteous Fury on and do heroics.
It's probably damage taken.
It's probably damage taken.
And I think
damage taken and damage mitigated.
Geared, if I was going to say, if you're really well geared, I don't take any damage, you know, as a pro Paladin.
It could count mitigated damage as well.
Yeah. I'm assuming it's going to be damage mitigated. It's going to look at blocks. It's going to like specifically look at each different class for different things too. I think it's probably smart.
Well, if you don't then run a tank, so you just go 4 DPS and a healer, you know, then surely one of those melee, let's say it was a Fury Warrior or it was a Frost DK or whatever, it's going to be a DPS still, but will they be classed as the tank and then get a bag?
It's going to be interesting to find
I think that's
out.
What the algorithm is.
It'd be funny to go in with 5 DKs. Then like who gets the healer bag, who gets the tank bag? Like that's going to be the like way far into the spectrum of like, you know, let's test this algorithm. I think in general, broadly speaking, I think it's good because you will get more of those of the healers and tanks doing dungeons for longer. It is going to be interesting to see how people abuse it and where it's at like a few months down the line.
Like surely the point of this is not actually to encourage tanks and healers, which all right, we know it is like that. Let's say that was the first layer, but it should really to be encouraging people to use the new LFG tool. So you should really still only get the bag if you form your group through the LFG tool.
Honestly, the biggest thing is what Duratosaur brought up is the fact it should be a thing that you can get because you're playing whatever is needed the most in Dungeon Finder. And I love this thing for random Dungeon Finder, but it is really unfair to the DPS.
It's not encouraging it in the right area. That's my point. Is like, well, surely where you want to encourage tanks and healers to get involved is in pugs, not in guild. I mean, I can go, bang, give me a healer, give me 3 DPS, and I can form a group in 5 seconds. I could log on now and go, let's do a heroic. And then what does that mean? Because I'm the tank, I deserve a bag? No, of course I don't. I've got a guild. I deserve a bag if I sit there in the LFG tool. Yeah. No, but if I'm doing the LFG tool and I'm forming the group and there's not many tanks in the LFG tool and you're having to pull people together that you don't know, then arguably as a tank you deserve a bag because you're going through that pain of pugging. Whereas in a guild, you can't get rewards over the rest of the guild, you know?
I think what Scotty's getting at is probably, it gets to the root of the issue, which is that the rewards should be your like contribution to the larger pugging community.
Doing it with your guild that's BIS.
It depends on the guild use,
but the people that don't have that, they're getting this extra incentive. I think that's what you guys are getting at.
Yeah, because like on retail right now, you could form dungeon groups with your guild and go do that, and then nobody gets extra, like this bonus loot thing. Or you could go through the RFD tool, and depending on your role and like which role is getting extra loot at that time, you might get a bonus because you're going through the RFD tool. This is just like go and run dungeon, like all tanks and healers, like guilt your DPS into running dungeons with you from your guild all day so that you can like farm a ton of like gold and stuff, like, which is fine, I guess, but I don't think that's the intended purpose. I think like what Scotty's saying is like the intended purpose is like to build that pool of available players for pugging, specifically tanks and healers. But this doesn't necessarily, like, it's not a 1-to-1.
We have a 25-person raid, okay? We have 2 or 3 tanks and we have 5 healers, right? So if everybody in that 25-person raid wanted to do a 5-person dungeon, then it requires, I feel like there's a lot more social people that you can bring in from the guild for DPS than there is people you can bring in for tank and heals, right? So the tanks specifically, right? Like, I want to advocate for the healers, but like there's really just one dungeon for us. But the tanks specifically, right? Their time commitment to that would be so much higher if they were going to help everybody in the guild run through dungeons than it is for the DPS.
But then all the druids, all the DKs, all the warriors, they can all use dual spec and tank dungeons.
Yeah, the dual spec is a big
and
change.
That's fair. There's dual spec now, but to motivate them to use their dual spec, because they'd probably in a lot of cases rather DPS, right?
Yeah. Or rather have their dual spec for PvP. A lot of people like that.
But also thinking your own guild, like I can speak for mine right now, that 2 to 3 weeks before Alduar launches, none of them are going to want to do a heroic with me. None of them. Like, no, unless there's an incentive to go and do it, they're not going to be that bothered, or they're on their ult or something like that. So your running dungeons with the guild only last so long until they just don't need to do it. Like, what are they going to bother? It's great doing stuff with your guild, but they probably ain't that bothered about doing it. They can skip that 12 minutes of absolute thrilling time with Mel. You know, they can skip that. Do you know what I mean? But the people in trade chat or in the LFG tool or whatever, you know, they might not have a guild. They're new to the game. You know, they've only just dinged 80, whatever. You know, they need Mel. They need Mel to go and carry them through the heroic. So that's where you get your extra reward. I don't think you should get your extra reward by doing a dungeon with all your tier 7 full bis guildies.
I'm with you there, but like I do like Mel's idea of all the consumes being soulbound. I really like that. Because, like,
I feel like the DPS are going to hate that, right? Because I can't, like, share the guild bank or whatnot.
I did read, like, an interesting thing about how, like, if this does inspire a lot, it could help a lot of server economies. Because if all the tanks and all the healers are just, like, getting consumables, like, thrown at them every time they run a dungeon, and it gets to a point where they're just, you know, throwing them on the auction house, that'll drive prices down because it's just an influx of consumables, which just makes, you know, raiding and stuff cheaper for everybody. So that's like a potential positive side effect.
Yeah, absolutely. A really positive side effect.
Gave you, like random consumables, right? And then like if you were in a guild run and you did it with your guild and it gave you like an agility flask or something, I could give it to whoever was in my party that could lead
to some weird tension though when it's like
you really want these rewards, don't you, Mel, for guild runs?
Yes, I do. Like, I don't even care about the logistics of it. Like, I probably, if I was DPS, I'd be hardcore against this, right? But no, I'm a healer and this is going to give me stuff, so I'm just like going to go all in. But
I'm not, I mean, I'm not against it. Yeah.
Yeah,
but now the DPS don't have to give me gold for healing them, you know? It's like I can take that out. That's fine. Now they don't have to pay me for getting healed in dungeons, and you know.
No, but there's a good point hidden in all of that. It's hidden. You have to really try and find it. I mean, it took me a while, but I found it. In between Mel's selfishness of really wanting all these extra bags to herself, I found it. You can potentially, you know, if you are doing a guild run, you get the bag. Let's say I'm tanking and I open the bag and it's got a couple of agility flasks in, or a couple of attack power flasks, a spell power flask, whatever. Then you do just divvy it out amongst everyone, don't you? And you go, here, you take that, you take that. So it would then make raiding cheaper for those that are actually doing heroics as a guild. So there is, I suppose that's on the flip side if I was to see it from Mel's point of view.
Yeah, but
I think that's definitely what she was getting at. Yeah,
I think driving the price
100%.
down is kind of rough, though, for people who like to make money doing professions. You know what I mean? Like
true.
that kind of is a bummer for the people that make pots. It's like it's already going to be a crazy bummer because Scotty did a video about it right after I had Rugs on the show and mentioned what I was doing on beta like a month or two back. But there's a place for rogues to just pickpocket away, and that's like how we try and farm the new Kroll blade. But I ended up just doing it for like an hour. I ended up with like over 100 health pots and different pots. So, I mean, consumes I think are going to be cheap, already super cheap. Like it's going to be nutso, especially with the quests that give out the little care packages too. Like, I just feel like you're really pushing out consume makers which maybe is a good thing because everybody's going to want to be jewel craft and engineering, but I think like maybe it is a good thing now that I'm thinking about it because there's not going to be any people making potions, so it might be really expensive.
I always like to, well, obviously you know, Bob, I've been on here enough times. I do like to see everybody's point of view, and you know, I do try and look at it from everybody's point of view, and I try who it is, you know. But I can't shift on this. Like, unfortunately, I really do believe that this bag should only be attached to the LFG tool, and they should use it. They really want this LFG tool to replace random dungeon finder, and they're like putting all their eggs in one basket and saying we'll do whatever we can to make it work. Then this is a tool at their disposal to make it work, because as a tank, it will make me use the LFG tool at a chance at getting one of those mounts.
Same.
But I don't believe I deserve one of them for doing a guild run.
Same. I am with Scotty. Mel has her own opinion. I don't know where Duratosaur lands.
Okay. Mel's opinion is that I agree with Scotty. Just selfishly, I'm not going to be upset if they implement it without that.
You really don't sound happy saying you agree with me. That's the hardest thing you've done all day.
It was. Yeah. It was difficult, but I did it. Yeah, you're kind of right.
We're going to get out of here, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
There's lots of ways you can support the channel to keep me here putting out World of Warcraft content and covering all future MMOs. Consider joining the channel as a member. You get access to emotes, everyone will know you're a member when you comment on future videos because you get a nice icon next to your name, and you get access to members-only videos, which I'll be putting a lot of on the channel throughout the year. Additionally, there's a Patreon link in the description as well. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.